Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to this live special edition episode of Paranormal Axetivities with your host, Ben Axe. And today I have the pleasure and honor to be joined by Mr. Zen Benefiel. How are you today, sir?
I'm awesome. Just returned from a wonderful vacation, short-lived, but we spent some time in Sedona this last weekend, which is a favorite spot for many.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal. I've been on vacation in a very long time, so I'm definitely jealous. But I'm not jealous that you're back, I guess. So what did you guys do on that trip?
We basically did a lot of hiking. My wife teaches piano, and she teaches 6 days a week. So every once in a while, we need an extended break just to give her some time. And when we do that, then we go out and visit some cool places in Arizona. This weekend, we rented a cottage in Sedona and took about a 7-mile hike.
Oh, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been to Arizona.
Well, you'll have to come, Ben.
I would love that. So you said she teaches piano 6 days a week. How long are her sessions? Because 6 days is a ton of time.
It is. They're anywhere from a half hour to an hour. And she's got 33 students. She's from St. Petersburg, Russia, and she was trained the Russian way, 5 years old. So she is phenomenal as a pianist, sight reader, music theory teacher, just amazing.
Oh, well, that sounds awesome. So congrats to that. That sounds like a lot of fun. I've always wanted to learn to play the piano. I just haven't made the time for it yet. But.
Yeah, I stuck with drums. We've been trying to figure out how to bridge the classical world that she comes from and the progressive rock world that I come from.
Nope. Hey, that's the way to go.
It is.
But alrighty, so let's get right into it here. So I know that you are a UFOologist. Is that correct?
How about ufologist?
Ufologist.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to pronounce that way.
It is. So tell me what that entails.
Basically, it's the study of UFOs. For many times, like MUFON used to study the brass tacks, the meat and potatoes, the material things, without much about the contactee side. My work is a lot more on the contactee and experience side, and I write extensively from that place. I've had experiences since I was a kid.
Oh, and that's a long time. Well, how old were you when you got your first experience, do you think?
Well, see, I lump them all into a much larger metaphysical experience. And I started when I was 5, or actually just prior to 5. My adopted sister came home. So I was 4.5 at that time. And then my parents informed me that I was also adopted. So even at that time, it caused me to go inside and ask some really deep, serious questions.
Absolutely.
And then shortly thereafter, I got acquainted with this voice that I was a little intimidated, not frightened. And so it kind of helped me to learn how to deal with the fear of the unknown. By the time I was 6, I started having out-of-body experiences. A couple of years later, I started waking up in bed, and I would watch my physical body get out of bed, climb out my bedroom window, walk across the neighbor's backyard, climb a fence, walk out into a 10-acre pasture, and then rise up into an orange cigar-shaped cloud. And that happened a couple of times a month for almost 2 years. Never really thought about it, except that I wanted to go back. Right, I couldn't wait to go back. When I never thought about the UFO side,
Sure.
Until I was 23, and we were getting ready to move to Phoenix. Now, I grew up around Muncie, Indiana, which is where Close Encounters started. Right, how fitting is that? So I was walking through a metaphysical bookstore, and there was only a couple, 3 people in there, nobody close to me, and all of a sudden, this book falls off a shelf onto the floor, open. And I'm like, oh, that's weird, right? So I walk over, and the book is Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us.
Oh, wow.
So I pick it up and I turn it over. And the first paragraph that I read, paraphrased, was that the most common contacting experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s was the orange cigar-shaped cloud.
That can't be a coincidence.
Right. So it kind of makes you go, duh. And at the same time, it was like all of a sudden everything made sense. Right.
Clicked.
And so in between those two periods, I had an NDE where I was asked the question, am I willing to die for what I believe in? After arguing with myself for a little bit, I considered Christ consciousness. It didn't feel quite full. Then I went on to cosmic consciousness and it felt full. So I said yes. And then I had a little tug from my solar plexus. And I was listening to Journey's first album at the time. So it really helped. And the next thing I know, I'm looking at my body laying across my dorm room bed. I turn to look where I'm going, and I'm immediately engulfed by white light. As soon as I could realize that I could still think because I was thinking about what was happening, right? So I recognized that there is no death, right? Consciousness continues. It just changes form.
Okay.
And then eventually I was given marching orders for this life and came back and kind of went, oh man, this is going to be wild, because I was told it's going to be, my life's going to be full of trials and tribulations, to have faith that everything would be there at its appointed time, and to trust and allow. And that was the toughest of the admonitions, right? And then I came back into my body and took a gulp of breath and just laid there for a little bit, reintegrating with my body. And while I was doing that, I got the understanding in a very truncated form of that we are cosmic consciousness condensed into form. We're not necessarily aware of it yet, but once that point of light that is within each one of us is still connected to the great light, right? And we go back and forth all the time. It's not just that we come here and we pass the body and we go back. No, we have multiple dimensions and layers, or whatever whatever label you want to put on it, that is integrated in that, and we can have access to that. We have to reach a certain point of consciousness in order to do so, and self-awareness and all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So after we moved to Phoenix, then I started having some very interesting conversations and experiences with guides and allies and sometimes ETs. And then after my divorce in '88, everything just kind of exploded. And I had one experience where you've heard the proverbial anal probe, right?
I have.
Well, from my experience, that's we are so far from being able to be open and transparent about our physicality and our sexuality or even our genitals, right? And so whenever any discussion goes to that place, everybody goes, oh, I can't talk about that. Right?
Sure.
So what I found out is that I woke up on a steel gurney on board with these electrodes lining my sphincter. And I was laughing. And these three grays were kind of pushed back against the wall in front of me. And as I was pulling those needles out, I was like, oh, come on, guys, what do you think you're doing? And I'm like, not realizing, hey, here's a perfect opportunity to have a conversation.
That makes sense. Absolutely.
Right? So that's kind of where it went. When I pulled the last one out, it felt like a sting. And I opened my eyes up and I'm back in bed instantly. I'm like, whoa. I went back. So I closed my eyes and I'm attempting to go back and I don't know how, right? Don't know how I got there in the first place, but I was there. So I wanted to get back because I knew if I was there once, I could go back somehow.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And in the process, I run into this being in a dark, it looked like a dark cloak, but it was shimmering between, white and black. And it had that shimmering appearance to it. And he says to me, next time, just relax. We're just trying to tune you up so we can communicate more easily. All right. So that left me with a huh? Right. So what had happened was just a week before, my girlfriend at the time was studying to be a massage therapist, and she had to study anatomy. And we had just done kind of a refresher course on the nervous system. And the perineum nerve ends in the sphincter. It's the only direct connect into the central nervous system. So if you were an advanced race that had the ability to adjust a person's vibratory rate slightly or more, right, where would you plug in?
That
Okay,
makes sense.
it's not necessarily invasive because all these things, from my understanding, are kind of set up beforehand. We just don't know when it's going to occur. And our ability to accept, honor, and reflect depends on how prepared we are to experience it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I have a couple of questions regarding that.
Go.
So I was looking at your books earlier, and I did see the alien agendas and anal probes. And so is that where that book came from or stems from, that experience?
Yep.
And then
it goes further.
Sure, absolutely. And then it's interesting how you brought up the anal probage and what they were doing. It wasn't just a weird science experiment and they're just abducting people and doing weird things with their genitals.
No, but it was science.
Doing something and actually improving your being.
Yep.
I like that. I've never heard that.
And so what happened from that is I started having these visitations at night that were like holographic projections into my room. And so I would have conversations about different things, administration, stuff to do with the Ashtar Command, the Galactic Federation, all the things that were in play at the time, and the fact that there was no manipulation within or malevolent activities in that process. So, which is something I already knew, right? This was their validation for me to build that trust factor, right?
Absolutely.
And so all the experiences that I have had, and I've met dozens of races, seen hundreds of ETs, there's no malevolence there. They're all advanced beings that are trying to get us to look at ourselves and realize that, oh yeah, we need to progress here or we're not going to survive.
I like that. So it's not like a war-driven race trying to take another planet. It's scientists trying to improve.
We're the war-driven planet, right? And it's not that it's such a bad thing. It's just part of the progression of a planetary civilization. Sure. You know, Jeff Mishlev and I had a discussion about it, and he had mentioned one of his people that did remote viewing and had contact, and she said they see it as the planetary civilization as a series of silos with alpha males at the top of them, right?
Sure.
When the shift that we're recognizing that's taking place is pretty much based in feminine energy, feelings, right? You can't think your way through a system built on vibrations. We have to feel our way through it.
That makes sense.
And it goes back to the indigenous first brain, second brain, third brain. You process through your gut because that's where everything's connected.
Absolutely. And earlier you mentioned interdimensions, and so I have to ask you. You've mentioned you've said you have seen several races, all of that. So, is alien existence or UFO existence? Are the planets coming here, or are they from other dimensions that we share the same? I guess the same area, but different frequencies.
Keep going.
Or is it both?
It's both.
Both,
right? Because when you look at the panoply of experiences, right, there are such a variety of them. Some of them are simply telepathic. Some of them actually have what look to be a physical type of being on another dimension, right? And some of them have a very tactile sensation. Those are more rare because the density of this planet is such that they really don't like to come here like that because it's very uncomfortable for them. Low vibe kind of thing. So they're interdimensional, multidimensional, ultra-dimensional. There's a lot of things in, it's like Horatio, right? There's more in in heaven than you dream of in your philosophy, right?
Fair enough.
And I've experienced a lot of that, so I know it more as fact from a direct experience rather than a theory or listening to somebody else's story or something like that. So oftentimes my conversations about them are very open. I'm vulnerable with my experience. I share it. I really don't care what you think. It's my experience. Ta-da. And I'm there to help others because I know many others. I'm one of the forerunners, I guess, because here I am 63, right? And this has been going on my entire life.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily contiguous, but consistent, right? So, and that's one of the things that I think some people don't really get. They expect it to be a consistent thing, and so they get into those periods where there's no contact and things, and they go, "Whoa, what's going on? I haven't had all this." Well, when the contact occurs, there is so much information exchange that takes place. There's a lot of learning afterwards because it's like you're given a memo, right? Then you have to apply all the information in the memo before you're ready for the next phase. So it's a constant building upon self in order to have a greater awareness of yourself and the connectedness that you have to the world.
And how do you think that or how is it that they pick and choose who they pick to give this information to and that kind of stuff?
Well, like anything, there's a progression, and we go through it before we come here.
Okay.
Right. The whole theory of reincarnation and whatnot. There are many lifetimes that we live, and those that have advanced knowledge, right, have lived many lifetimes, and many have recognized that they've come here to do something now. They're not necessarily sure exactly what, but they know that they're here to help facilitate this shift in awareness, right? Kind of a different kind of great reset and globalization, right? Where it has to do more with creating harmony among people and planet.
Gotcha.
Shifting the agenda from profit over people and planet to people and planet over profit.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never thought of it that way before, but as you say it in that manner, because I've always struggled with, how it works, why it works, whether they're interdimensional, whether they're from another physical planet, and you put it's all one giant circle, the way you're explaining.
It is. That's the whole concept of oneness applied. It doesn't change anything about our individuated efforts and the practicality and pragmatic results that we need to get with that, because if we don't do that, none of the rest of it matters.
That's a fact.
Right? So we get lost in the exploration and forget to recognize what's right in front of us. And it's very simple, and the way that I explained to you makes sense, right? So how do we make that sense common? And that's kind of the process we're in right now, coming out of the Great Reset. We've never had this opportunity with the sequestration and the obsession on self-hygiene. That's a behavioral modification plan, right?
Absolutely.
So if you understand psychology, that automatically will turn inward. And so we'll reflect on, hey, who am I? Where am I at? What do I really want? What do I care about? Who do I care about? What can I do? What's my skill set? All of that, those self-reflective, investigative questions that haven't been happening because we've been too caught up in a rat race.
Sure. And that still continues.
It does. And yet the existing systems that are in place don't necessarily need to be destroyed, right? They just need to be fine-tuned. It's all about leadership and who's leading the way and how well it's organized and the resonance that it has with natural order, which is what's emerging now.
And I think that's one thing that, our modern world is afraid of. We're afraid of an order that we can't control. And, it's scary.
And pardon my French, but we're scared shitless when we have to face something that's an unknown or that we can't control.
Absolutely.
Now, the paradox is that the ultimate truth is under our control because we have a choice in letting go and allowing it to present itself to us instead of peering in, right? Which is what our microscopic view is, right? We're trying to drill down. We're trying to use destructive testing in order to figure out how things are made. Well, why not just ask, right? And allow, if we have this interconnection and this vast, almost infinite intelligence that's available in individuated form, because each of us have a skill set that's built in both through our lineage, right, as well as our solar development. So what skill set do we have? Where do we apply that? Whereas instead of putting it into the profit over people and planet mode, which gets us into a competitive state, then what's collaborative? And how does that affect the shift into people and planet over profit?
That's fair.
Now let's bring it back into the ufological realm, right? There's a great book that Wilbert Smith, it's actually, it's a combination of his memoirs. It was published in 1964. It was called The New Science. And a friend of mine, Grant Cameron, posted it on Facebook a couple of months ago. It's a really tough read because it addresses both science and spirituality, and it reflects his conversations with people from elsewhere and how they feel about us and what they would like us to know, right? So he was the head of Canada's UFO investigations in the early 50s, ran a project called Project Magnet, I believe. So it's not like he's just some hillbilly from nowhere.
Right.
Government sanctioned. And so he pulled all this information together and basically said, first of all, you don't understand nothingness, right? And that you don't understand that everything starts with a point with spin. And spin is the only consistent thing throughout the universe. Spin,
what does that mean?
So spin we could see as frequency, right? So, and depending on your frequency is how you're going to set up relationships with other frequencies, right? If you're internally cacophonic, then you're going to set up a cacophonic environment for which to enjoy yourself because that's what you've chosen to do. And if you choose to set something up that's more harmonious, then you're going to look for resonance in others that is more familiar, that actually has a good feeling to it as opposed to a cacophonic, because that, just feels all unsettling, right? So, and in the process during that, we often feel what most of us term anxiety in our gut. There's a flip side to that. It's also anticipation or the preparation for the arrival of something new, right? The unknown that's going to present itself in a way that we need to prepare for so that we don't freak out.
Absolutely. So real quick, what does sorry, I'm just like thinking of all of that together. It's really interesting.
Oh yeah, that was a data dump, and I apologize, but it's time that we all start talking about and understand what's going on.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Is there going to be a time when the military, because they already have started kind of acknowledging, yeah, they've seen UFOs and that kind of stuff, but is there going to be a time where alien life in any kind of form is just common knowledge with us as Americans or us as Earthlings or just the human race in general? Will there be a time that we just accept that alien life exists and it's common knowledge?
Yes. I'm not going to say when. to make a projection or to create a prophecy or whatever, I think is just ridiculous.
Sure.
Because it depends on a lot of factors, and that the main one being how willing are we. Okay, I'll put it this way. Klaus Schwab, I don't know if you're familiar with who he is.
I'm not.
He is the executive founder and executive director of the World Economic Forum. Okay. So he wrote a book recently called COVID-19, The Great Reset. In that, he presents a couple of questions, one towards the individual side of things and one towards the business side of things. And the individual side, he asks, can we be compassionate and kind towards one another? Because that's what it's going to take.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, if you're thinking about something that's emerging that's part of natural order. There's going to be a resonance to it that is not going to be allowed if there's any kind of conflict, right? Because it's just the energy, it's a low vibe. The higher vibe is not going to be able to come through until we make the choices to move forward collectively in that manner. Again, it goes back to the existing systems and being able to retrofit them with the people, places, and things that are necessary to provide sustenance to the people on the planet and to clean up the planet. Now, those things, there's a lot of technology. There's kids that have come up with technology that will do the trick, right? We just, we're still under the corporate eye, if you will, and the corporatocracy is in charge of both church and state, pretty much. Right. So how do we change that? Well, we develop methods to reconnect, whether it's through virtual environments now, because we can't really gather yet, or whether we kind of ignore the masquerading and begin to assemble and start talking about things. How do we do this? Right. And we're not trying to be to revolt, right? Although it's kind of a revolt, but it's a peaceful one. It's like, hey guys, isn't it time?
It's evolution.
Right? We have done this, and it shows that it's not working. And it's like Einstein says, you do the same thing over and over and expect different results. You're insane.
Absolutely.
Right? So, but it's not to say that we need to judge the pattern. It's like, Luba and I were talking on the way back today. In retrospect, we have to let go of the past in order to proceed into the future. Otherwise, we drag it with us and we have repeating patterns, right?
Yep.
So and the reason we were talking about this is because I don't have memories of my childhood. Certain areas of my life, I don't have many memories of. And it's post a significant emotional event, usually metaphysical, that happened during that time is a rite of passage that took me to a new level of awareness, right? Okay. So it kind of taught me that letting go of the past is more appropriate if you're going to move into the future, because you're going fresh.
That makes sense. In talking about levels, you brought up earlier too, you brought up how the afterlife, not afterlife, but reincarnation, each level is a different reincarnate, if that makes sense. And
well, speaking of afterlife, and this is up your alley. I told you there's something I wanted to share with you earlier. So I had a friend that I grew up with. His name was Steve Absher, and we called him Blab. Yeah, that was just his nickname. So after we moved to Arizona, he died in a motorcycle accident. And at some point, I got a wild hair, and laying in bed, I started reaching out to him. Actually, I prayed first. I said, Jesus, if it be your will be done. Can I talk to Steve? And so I start projecting consciously, Steve, are you out there? Steve, man, can you hear me? Nothing, right? And so I get louder, Steve, right? Still nothing. And I think, oh, there's probably a few Steves out there.
Makes sense.
So I was like, Blab, are you out there, man? Is that, can you hear me? And my given name's Bruce. He says, Bruce, is that you? And I said, yeah, man, where are you at? And I'm bing, right in the center of my vision was his face. And at the same instant, my wife raises up off her pillow and she says, Bruce, what are you doing? And I said, nothing. Why? And she says, well, I just saw Steve's face. And I tried blinking and it wouldn't go away. And so at that point, of course, the room was dark. She could not see me. I couldn't see her.
Okay.
I came to tears because it was real.
Validation. Right? Yep, absolutely.
And so I said to her, I said, okay, now we understand the body loses 4 to 6 ounces of weight immediately upon cessation of life. It's been proven medically. So weight has mass has form. I wonder if we can see him with our eyes open. She goes, I don't know, scares me. I'm going back to bed. You do whatever you want.
There you go.
I said, okay, cool. So I lay back down, eyes open, and I'm looking out over the end of the bed. And I'm, Blab, can I see you? And this mist shows up, kind of a grayish whitish mist, and it gradually coalesces into his body. And of course, he had his old flannel shirt and jeans and long hair. He was 6'6", something like that. So he's kind of a big guy. I'm 5'8". And he's standing there, and all I could say was, far effing out, man. Tell me, can you travel with a thought? And he says, don't know. And I see trails going out of the room and trails coming back into the room, and there he's standing at it. And I said, you go back home, meaning Indiana. I was in Phoenix, right?
I gotcha.
And he says, yeah. And again, far fucking out. Oh, excuse me.
Absolutely. You're good.
Okay, wait a minute. I know how powerful my mind could be. Am I projecting your image, or are you really there?
Right.
And about that time, I felt the sheets move across my feet. The end of the bed moved. He had his foot up on the bed, had his hand on his knee and his elbow in his hand, and with his chin in his hand, smiling at me like a Cheshire cat, says, how's that?
Boom. That's crazy.
And so at that point, I could not take it anymore. Not that I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it laying down.
Right.
Too much energy. So I got up, got dressed, took a walk. This was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Walked a mile, got a pack of Camels. No, actually it was a pack of Cools. And spent the next hour talking to him about what it was like on the other side, and kind of maybe giving him some hints and questions about how to navigate, because he was still fresh and didn't know how. Not that I knew, but I'd been there before. So I had some different questions that he may not have had.
That's incredible. He actually stuck around for a long period of time and just bullshitted with you, like old friends.
Well, we were.
Right. That's phenomenal.
And I had no preconceptions or belief systems that were violated, right? Or they had to violate. It was just an open, vulnerable conversation, and it was on the fly. This is just what was happening. Deal with it. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of folks would probably not be able to do that. And I get that. For whatever reason, I am, and I'm comfortable with it.
That makes a lot of sense. My wife is what we have coined her. I'm not really sure about all those phrases and stuff, but we called her an empath, because she has the ability to kind of speak and hear and see things that other people can't. So that's kind of the term we went with. And it's
here's a term for you: clairauls.
I haven't heard that one.
Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience.
I got that. All right.
Okay. So yeah, I like to be fun, right? So I call them the clairauls, and only your hairdresser knows, right? Okay, so these are all finer senses that we have. And as we become more, there's multiple factors affecting that. One is we're in a different area of space that has a higher vibratory rate naturally. And then we have this shift in consciousness that's consistent with that. Jose Arguelles and I, before he passed, he was a good friend. But we had a discussion about the progression through the shift. And of course, he started the harmonic convergence back in '87, and saying that basically there's a 50-year window that opened in '87 and closes in 2037. And this is the segue between the Piscean and the Aquarian age. Well, in the midst of that, the apex, there's a dramatic shift. We go from the acquisition of awareness to the application of it. And in that application, everything that doesn't fit is going to come to the surface. And depending on how resistant it is or how inept we are, it'll take anywhere from 5 to 10 years, right? So we got a couple more years or more. Right. Sure. And this was, we were just thinking, best guess is that we could get through it. Well, by 2037, we're going to be fully engaged. We're going to be in real trouble. But the fact that we can change on a dime, respectively, although it doesn't necessarily seem like it, because change, we're on a day-to-day basis. It seems like it's slow.
Sure.
But on a year-to-year basis, or 5 years, when we begin to pull back and look at it from that perspective, it's rather quick. And when you consider it in the perspective of time we've been here, man, it's a blink of an eye.
Time flies.
Right?
Absolutely.
So being able to recognize that, and not to coin a phrase, but to go with the flow and be able to allow those additional senses to lead us, nurture us, guide us into doing the right things right. Right? There's no magic in that, but there's magic in it. Right?
Really, that makes a lot of sense as well.
It's really real. It's a very simple concept to begin with. The application, as it unravels or unfolds, or those fractals get distributed throughout behaviors and systems and people, places, and things, it gets really complex. But again, we don't have to understand that complexity. All we have to do is understand our individual path well enough that, where we arrive on the prudent path for ourselves, which over time, the more awareness we garner, I see it as kind of a perfected form, fit, and function in the world. It's that mission that we seek but aren't really clear of. Well, it shows up right in front of us when we ask the right questions for it to.
Sure, absolutely. And, do you think that everybody on this planet has the ability to kind of get involved in that and be able to feel and see those things?
I do. Not everybody chooses it. Sometimes even there's stations in life, even with, we aren't based in a caste system, kind of like the Hindus were, right? But we do have a division of labor, right? And it's not that we change that division of labor. We imbue it with awareness and consciousness as to how it fits with everything else.
Gotcha. That makes
sense. Right now we see it as disjointed.
Sure.
We don't even see it as a system, let alone holistic.
That makes sense. Another thing I was going to ask you here as well, because you brought up, you've seen the paranormal and you've have a pretty awesome paranormal story there, actually. So, and, bringing up the interdimensional beings and that kind of, it sounds like, because some people say, well, how can aliens exist and how can ghosts exist? Well, the way that you have already explained it, it's all one big circle again. So is it possible that like some alien entities that others have seen could have possibly been human lives on Earth at one point, if that makes sense? If I
absolutely
worded that correctly.
Absolutely. And on another note, when you consider, okay, let me give you some science reference. Vernon Nepi and Edward Close developed a model of reality called the TDVP, and that stands for Triadic Dimensional Distinction Vortical Paradigm, excuse me. And what they posit is that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. And that's for us. Now, it doesn't exclude other dimensions.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Now, that fits with the model that I experienced called the multiplane awareness that William Swigert developed back in the 1950s. Same time that Smith was about his work, interestingly enough.
Fair enough.
And it was all the same time that the Urantia book was being compiled and presented. Now, what happens gosh, I almost lost my train of thought. So in the, actually I did lose it. Woo-hoo.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you.
No, I distracted myself. I do that enough. I try to be a tangentialist and bring it back. And sometimes I get lost in the cycles.
I understand that all too well. I talk faster than my brain usually works, and I just get flustered in my words all of the time. So completely understand.
Well, anyway, it'll come back around. I'm sure there'll be a point to illustrate. It was about the multiple dimensions. And so see how that works? one understands the multiple dimensions that we exist on. We have bodies on those dimensions. We have consciousness specific to that bandwidth of frequencies and consciousness that we live in, right? Now, we have the ability of expanding that view, and especially being physically incarnate, we have access to all of those realms. And this is part of the process that those that we know as ascended masters learn in order to be able to take their body with them, because they're connected to all the other realms in order to be able to do so, right? So, and we still, that sounds like right, that sounds almost incredulous, and yet it is, or that's how it is from my understanding. So my point was going to be that we could at the same time inhabit what we think is an alien body, right?
Absolutely.
So when people show up, for instance, my wife's had a number of occasions where she just gets pulled up and all of a sudden she's on board a ship with others, right? So when she shows up with those others, what form do you think she's going to be in? Human?
That makes sense to be the other form.
Right. Now, she can't see herself.
Sure.
But they interact as though
they're
one of them.
And what do they look like? What does she explain that they look like?
Oh, well, she's got one that's been around for a while. It's an Arcturian. His name's Nick. And he actually came to her on our wedding night and told her that they were proud that she was now the bride or the wife of son of Ashtar. Now, that's a whole nother story. Right? One of the ones that she remembers most distinctly is kind of a squirrel-looking character. She says he's got the head like a squirrel, big eyes, and he's just really vibrant and loving, right? Because when you're in the presence, it feels like you're completely transparent to them, because you are. They see right through you. They read you because they have all of those senses developed that we talked about earlier, the clairals, right? Only they're way more advanced than just, like psychometry. You pick up a pen and hand it to somebody, and then they can read the pen and tell you all about who just touched it, right? Those kinds of senses to them are minor because they deal with things at a universe level.
Fair enough.
Okay, because they're at that level of consciousness where they're available to that, just as we are here. When you consider our interaction with them and the growing relationships that we're having now, compare that to their relationships with others in the same fashion.
Absolutely. So is this happening like all over the planet and with multiple? That's what it's hard to wrap your head around, the multiple different types of alien life.
Like I said, it's hard to think your way through it. Built on vibration. You got to feel your way through it. And when you ask the questions to bring up those things, you'll have a visceral answer. You understand what I mean by that?
Absolutely. And it's deeper than just aliens.
Yes, because it's all connected.
Right. That's fascinating. Like, I'm just like learning just from it's crazy.
Well, and now you understand why I write profusely, because all of this stuff, it has been given to me. What am I going to do with it? It's how I share it, considering the audience listening capacity, and it hasn't been there until recently.
Sure.
So, and as an example, talk about dreams come true. And my coaching business is actually called Be the Dream. I came up with the name back in 1988 during my exit from the aerospace company. Okay. So we have the ability of being able to connect with those, and I'm going off on another tangent here.
Oh, you're fine.
To connect with those visceral events, right? Ask better questions about them, and then open up to a greater reality to look around and begin syncing the outer world with that. Because it's here. All we got to do is open our eyes. There's, in some instances, I used to do guided tours for people, and still do sometimes. And depends on the coaching client as well. It comes in handy there.
Absolutely.
But those guided journeys, we see things two ways: eyes open, eyes closed. There's a third way where you see the same thing with your eyes open as you do with your eyes closed.
And what does that mean?
We call that the second sight, right? Now, sometimes we close our eyes and we see something and we're looking at things. And that's, I think, the most prevalent term is second sight.
It makes sense. I've experienced that. You have your eyes closed, and then you just see
stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So those kinds of things, being able to just be aware of it and be okay with it. It's weird. Yeah. I love it. Right. I'm probably one of the weirdest guys you'll ever meet, and I love it. And
absolutely.
I have a lot of fun with life, and people enjoy engagement. Right.
And do you think that maybe that's one of the reasons that started happening to you at such a young age, and you had the ability to be open?
Set up. Absolutely.
Was to teach it?
I had to learn it, had to experience it. You got to do that. I was a high school teacher for half a dozen years. And in our the teacher cert program, one of the things that we had to be able to do was understand that passive learning, you retain maybe 40% of the material. When you teach it, you retain 98% of it.
Absolutely.
So, which means you have an experiential base that you can continue to grow on, and for yourself as well, right? And to be able to deliver more highly functional material in ways that are more understandable. Again, back to Einstein, he said, if you can't explain something simply, you really don't understand it.
Makes sense. Appreciate that. that way of thought. That's phenomenal. So I know you've written a lot of books. You have them all listed here.
This is just half of them.
I wrote some of them down here as well. I didn't write them all down, but I have a couple here. We have 0 to 1. And so what are your...
It's not there either, is it?
What are the topics of your is each book a same topic in a different way? How do you write? How do you go about writing, and what's your intent with those books?
Pieces, the main book, which is right behind me, stubbing my toe on purpose. That is a retitled compilation. I wrote 3 books called Zendor the Barbarian initially, which is the one just left of it. And after people telling me for years, you need to write a book, I love to write, but not yet. Right? So the universe finally provided some time, and I started writing, and stuff just started pouring out. So Stubbing My Toe is kind of a autobiography. Now, Jeff Mishlove made the comment about he was impressed with my ability to observe and report on subjective experiences. Right. So that's where the understanding and teaching comes, so that I can explain how others might have a similar experience and be able to set them up for their own direct experience. Because it doesn't matter if whatever I say doesn't mean a hill of beans if you're not able to experience it yourself.
Absolutely. And that even translates to paranormal things. I've heard a lot of people's stories. It's hard to really believe or take seriously until you experience your own. That happened to me at a young age, and now I can accept and understand and really feel other stories. Right. So that translates.
So I got set up with this. Number 1, I was orphaned. Number 2, I was adopted by a family with the last name of Benefiel, which when I finally researched that, it means good fidelity. How are you going to look at yourself in the mirror and do otherwise? And Bruce is kind of a dweller of the thicket, right? So I had all these word games and stuff, and my parents dad was a 32nd degree Mason, mom was an English and Lit teacher with also a master's degree in music. And they were both avid readers, and they encouraged my curiosity, and to a point where I started having things beyond what they could deal with, even as a kid. You know, the orange cigar-shaped cloud. I tried to talk to Mom about the voice, and she just kind of blew me off. So I realized, okay, that's a dead end. So all of this, I just got to internalize and help.
Absolutely.
So, and I got to help internally, fortunately. And because of that, then, and with all the other experience, I got to be honest, for a long time, and I had people say, hey, you're not from here. Well, duh. But physically, I had the question, and there were others that had said, hey, you know, you were dropped off here. And I'm like, eh. So when we first got married, my wife's first Christmas present to me was an Ancestry subscription.
That's kind of neat.
2 years later, my half sister shows up, and then I meet my birth mother, 61 years old, right? She had been wondering about me, and the kid and her daughter finally said, hey, we got to do something.
Oh, wow.
So we connected. Then I found out that I had met my father at a UFO discussion group in Phoenix in the late 80s and spent the weekend with him at his cabin in Prescott. Neither one of us knew.
Wow.
Or at least I don't think so.
Right.
He may have had an idea. Wasn't even on my mind.
Sure. Right? I mean, that doesn't. So there's something to that.
So apples don't fall far from the tree. So having that understanding now, he died in 2017, so I didn't get a chance to reconnect. But we went and spent a week with my mother that summer, and it was just a hoot. You know, she had these concerns. You know, a lot of reconnections don't end up on a happy note.
Sure.
Right. Ours was the happiest note it could have been.
Well, that's phenomenal.
There were patterns that I saw in me that she demonstrated. I'm like, holy shit, you know, so much for nature and nurture, because here's patterns that I'm seeing in her that I had no contact or nurturing in. They were just natural.
Absolutely.
And Luba thought it was hilarious. Right? So, you know, we had all these kinds of things. By the way, she just passed a few weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's a cool, fresh recruit on the other side.
No, fair enough.
So, and I told her we kind of had to talk about that. We'll see. She hadn't shown up yet.
Nope. You know, that's the kind of thing. It's going to be different for everybody. I firmly believe it's a different experience, and people take it different ways, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it depends on your experiential base and your belief system.
Sure.
Number one. Number two, it depends on your lineage, right? Because your genetic codes based on the family heritage and everything that was learned in those cultures is going to have a deeply embedded effect as well. Right? And we don't consider that for the most part. Maybe advanced thinkers do.
Sure.
Right? Because you ripple through the past, you think, okay, well, what makes me me?
Right. You really dig down.
Well, if you're going to figure out who you are, you have to look at where you came from, first of all. And, you know, genealogy is great for that purpose, but it can get a bit obsessive.
Sure.
So, again, it's back to the simple present moment, asking questions, looking at what's showing up, reflecting on the synchronicities, because those become more prevalent the more awareness you garner. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and the world just becomes a wonderful place at that point.
I mean, that is the great way to look at it. And I have one more question for you. I know we're getting towards the end of time here. It's kind of off topic, but I want to get your thoughts on it. It's something that's really interesting to me. And I have a buddy. He's actually a big part of the website, The Buzz, and he has the reoccurring number happening to him. The number 11 just shows up constantly. And almost every day, he's just showing me more and more evidence of the number 11. From even last week, his grandmother died, and it showed 11 with that. And so just his entire life here recently, at least as far as this past year or so, has just been 11, 11, 11. So what is your input on that?
Let me start out with my NDE occurred on 11/11.
Oh, there we go.
Right, 1975. Tuesday afternoon. Nice Moody Blues song about that. Those numbers, 11, first of all, numerically is a master number, right? So on the first side of things, or at least one level, he's being asked to step up into his mastery, right? That there is that, and it's not a push, it's an invitation, because you have to choose to make it. You have to choose to step into it. The subtle opportunities are always present, but you have to make the choice to lean into it or step into it. It's like fear. You lean into it because it's a door. It's not a barrier.
That makes sense.
So back to the numbers. I love palindromes,
Okay.
right? 12/21, 13/31,
right.
Whatever. 44/44, 33/33, 11/11, 22/22, all those kinds of things.
Right.
Those show up in both Luba and I, or in our lives as well. One of the things that we noticed early on is that our phones seem to have this unique relationship with our conversations.
Yeah, that happens.
Right? And so, the dings or the message, the notifications, we've got several different sounds on the phone. And so we've just kind of played this game. At least we're aware that sometimes the noises that our phone makes, it is in direct reference to conversations that we're having. And sometimes we'll see it as confirmation, and sometimes we'll see it as, nah, you don't want to go that way.
Right.
Still confirmation, right? But with a variety of meanings.
Absolutely.
And it just depends on the conversation at the time. And, sometimes we'll be having conversations about quantum physics and the relationship to self and assembling the reality that we're capable of doing. Or, we're talking about raising our 16-year-old.
Right. Absolutely.
We're taking care of our, her mom's 86 years old, Russian, and doesn't speak English and has dementia slightly. So, that's another part of our life where we're caretakers. So it's not like our lives are devoid. I've got 4 kids, 9 grandkids, and 2 great grandkids. So, these kinds of things are, it's like, what kind of world are we going to leave our children, our grandchildren, and our great grandchildren, and so on and so forth.
That's interesting. So there is definitely something, and as you explained that, and I was thinking as you were talking earlier, that also goes in the full circle, the 11 reoccurring, or I guess the number reoccurrence, along with aliens, along with paranormal, everything is a circle. That's what I'm getting.
It all dovetails, right? Because of multiple levels of it. And, whether it's like this or like this, you turn it, what was it, the steeple, when you turn it, you got the people in it, right? So, but we're all in it.
Sure.
In some way, shape, or form. It's just whether we're willing to admit it to ourselves or not, because every one of us have subtle impressions.
Yep, absolutely.
Most of us are afraid to say anything because we'll think everybody think we're nuts.
Yeah.
Right. And I went through that. They thought I was nuts. And I fortunately had a psychiatrist that said, no, you're not nuts. You went through a spiritual awakening. Why so young? I don't know, because most people don't go through it till their mid-40s, if they ever do.
Right.
Which stuck in my mind. And then in my mid-40s, I realized, empty nesting. I get it.
Makes sense. Yeah. When you put it that way, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, everything does. It's figuring out what perspective to find, whether it's circular or spherical thinking, to look at it in a way where everything just finally locks in and makes sense, because it will. And if it doesn't, you're not there yet.
Right. Fair enough. Well, sir, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me tonight. And before we let you go, tell us how we can find you, your websites. I need you to promote yourself right now, basically.
Wait, yeah. Let me put my radio voice on.
There you go.
Sunday. No.
So I have a personal site. It's zenbenefiel.com. It's ZenBenefiel.com. And that's got a smattering of all the work that I do. I've got a bunch of different websites. I have 3 businesses that I run. One is team partnering, also teampartnering.com. I facilitate pre-construction team building sessions for major construction projects.
That's interesting.
Buildings, roads, bridges, waterways. My last one here in Arizona was the F-35 operations and maintenance facility at Luke Air Force Base. So I've done some high level stuff. I also have a web development social media business called Plank Media, Max version, PLANCK media.com. My favorite, though, is my transformational coaching business, and my website is bethedream.com. And each one of those sites will have ways to contact me. The transformational coaching, I work with solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. One of the most significant results I got was with a chiropractor that waited 7 years to come talk to me after our first meeting. And in 90 days, with what we were able to develop as far as an action plan for him, he increased his net receipts by almost 35%.
Oh, wow. So
I knew it, right?
That's awesome.
Both sides, the metaphysical and the pragmatic, and the very, I've got a couple of master's degrees in business as well. So I'm able to bring all of those things together and bridge worlds, in effect. Those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me. You can Google me, and it will create a rabbit hole that you are likely to get lost in for several weeks.
There you go.
I have a lot of material on the web.
I did that yesterday. I looked you up, and I did find that rabbit hole. There was a lot going on there. And all these websites will also be in the description of the episode, so be sure to check out all of your amazing websites here. And I have one that I have listed down here, the Ufology.
Oh, yes, that was the passion, which is why we came together to begin with, is ufologypress.com. Now, what that is, it came about through just a mutual interest. A team of folks built a wireframe that could be, any subject matter could be put into it, curated, right? So we chose to build this on the ufology side. So I went out and I researched as many different blogs and websites and things that I could find that had RSS feeds, first of all, and then books and tapes and movies, DVDs, what have you, authors, and then websites like ET Let's Talk, which does a lot of CE5 efforts and things like that. So it was our way of showing a virtual model of collaboration, even though it's relatively non-existent in the right? But you got to seed it somehow.
Sure.
And so our work continues in that way. I have an ancillary blog that feeds into that called Ufology Press with an E.com, of which has my running commentary, and the book in the lower of your screen is basically a combination, or it's a compilation of the last 8 blog posts on Ufology Press. Pretty interesting reading.
It sounds like it, and I grazed through a lot of the blogs there. There's some fascinating things. And, when you went through a lot today, I know you have a lot more, so I definitely wouldn't mind having you come back on sometime in the future. I really want to hear. I really need to hear about your wife's wedding day and what they called you. So that's going to be a next time story, I think.
Sure, maybe it'll be time to where it's good to talk about them, because I've been pretty reticent to do so, because the Ashtar Command really isn't understood.
Oh, fair enough.
And there's a lot of garbage out there about it.
That's fair. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today. I learned a lot. I feel like I'm walking out of this episode like a student in a classroom, if that makes sense. And like a lot of it seems validating, because I always thought everything is connected in one way or another, and there's just trying to find those pieces. So that makes a lot of sense.
You're going to love this, Ben. So we found the actuarial table. Come on. Right? You know what an actuarial table is, right?
I don't think I do.
Okay. It's what life insurance is set up on.
Oh, I gotcha.
Right. So I was just kind of being poking at the whole death thing, actuarial.
Makes sense. All right, sir. I appreciate you so much for taking the time to hang out with me. And
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yep, absolutely. Be sure to go to all the phenomenal websites that will be posted in the links below. And sir, you have a great night.
You too. Amazing day.